Hi everyone, my name is Batime Salvador Deval. So today I will be discussing CA 200 or Institutional Correction subject in Module 1 entitled Institutional Based Correction in month of March 2022. So let's start. So let's first define what is institutional and correction. So institutional, this is a relating to organized establishments, foundations, societies, or to the buildings that we occupy. Like for example, hospitals, universities, bank, or even church. That's some of examples of institutional. And what is correction? It is a variety of functions typically carried out by government agencies and involving the punishment, treatment, and supervision of persons who have convicted crime. So, examples for this are those jail or prison and rehabilitation center. There's a lot of examples of correction, but the we really know that jail and rehabilitation is one of it. So next, what is institutional based correction? This means that the individual is placed in a prison or jail, which means that they are housed in a secure correctional facility. So I put some examples of an institutional based correction. Those prisoners are housed in a secure correctional facilities that there are police women or policemen that um, secured them. So, what is the difference between institutional based correction and community based correction? So, as what I said earlier, that institutional based correction means that individuals are placed in a prison or jail, while community based correction means that the offenders are placed on a parole or given probation. These types of program frequently allow the offenders to engage in work or even school during this prison term. So there's a lot of prisoners that given a chance um, to engage in work or even in school during their prison term or the parole. So that's the difference between the two. So our lesson for today is to discuss the global view in prison administration, prison, the antiquity to modernity, the influence of Roman Catholic Church of Pope John Paul II, the pro-life Pope, Walnut Street Jail, King Henry VII, and King Edward VI, a jowl of King Henry VIII. This is the lesson. So, prison administration. We know that this is a fundamentally involves the application of both leadership and management techniques to correctional institutions. So, every every prison administration have I have a leader that is knowledgeable on how he or she um, lead in that kind of institution or the correctional institution. So prison administration in here in the Philippines are one are the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, or as we know as BJMP, and Bureau of Correction or BUCOR. So the head of BJMP is Chief Alan Soliano Errol, our current head in BJMP. And our current head in Bucor here in the Philippines is Director General Gerald Q. Bantag. Next is, so let's focus first on the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. So what is penology? This is a section of criminology that deals with the philosophy and practices of various societies in their attempts to repress criminal activities and satisfy public opinion via an appropriate treatment for persons convicted of criminal offenses. So this is a kind of study that um, um, what is the treatment for the persons convicted of criminal offenses. So that is penology. So this is the brief history of BJMP. So on January 2, 1991, the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, or BJMP, was created through Republic Act 6975 as a line bureau under the Department of Interior and Local Government. The Jail Bureau is the upgraded version of its forerunner, the Office of Jail Management and Penology of the Infant PC or ANP, last headed by General Arsenio E. Concepcion. So BJMP is mandated to direct, supervise, and control the administration and operation of all district, city, and municipal jails nationwide with prolonged task of safekeeping and development of PDL. So some of the functions of BJMP is to implement strong security measurements of the control of PDL. Some are to provide the basic needs of PDL, conduct activities for development of PDL, improve jail facilities, that's very important, and to promote the general welfare and development of personnel. So, as what I had said earlier, that BJMP was created through Republic Act number 6975. So this is an act establishing the Philippine National Police under the Organization Department of the Interior and Local Government and for other purposes. This act um, created the BJMP, or the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. So next is the Bureau of Corrections. Also, this is also a brief history of this correctional institution here in the Philippines. So Bureau of Prison was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905 as an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. The Reorganization Act also re-established the San Ramon Prison in 1907, which was destroyed during the Spanish-American War in 1898. So, Bureau of Prison was renamed Bureau of Correction right now. So, um, we are the known prison for now is the Bureau of Corrections. So, Bureau of Correction is an agency under the Department of Justice that is charged with custody and rehabilitation of national offenders, that is those sentenced to serve a term imprisonment for more than 3 years. So, um, those people who will be sentenced to serve a term imprisonment for more than 3 years will be put in this kind of institutional correction, or the Bureau of Correction. So, to carry out its mandate, the Bureau undertakes the following. So, confine persons convicted by the courts to serve a sentence in national prisons. Keep prisoners from committing crimes while in the custody. Yes, that's one of the mandate. Um, Provide humane treatment by supplying the inmates basic needs and implementing a variety of rehabilitation programs designed to change their pattern of criminal or antisocial behavior. Bureau of Correction also mandate to engage in agro-industrial projects for the purpose of developing prison lands and resources into productive bases or profit centers, developing and employing inmate manpower skills and labor, providing prisoners with a source of income, and augmenting the Bureau's yearly appropriations. Next is there are 7 units nationwide under the Bureau of Correction. This is namely the New Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa City, the Correctional Institution for Women, or CIW, in Mandaluyong City, Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm in Puerto Princesa City in Palawan, Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm in Occidental Mindoro, San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga City, later Regional Prison in Abuyog Leyte, and lastly the Davao Prison and Penal Farm in Panabo, Davao Province. So, Bureau of Correction was this is related to the Republic Act numbers 1057. So this is an act strengthening the Bureau of Correction or the Bucor and providing funds therefor. So the declaration of policy or the section 1 is it is the policy of the state to promote the general welfare and safeguard the basic rights of every prisoner incarcerated in our national penitentiary, even though they are criminals or they are the perpetrator in a crime. They also have the welfare and safeguard or their rights, because they are also people. They have their rights, same as to us who are outside of that corrections. So um, let's first define the antiquity. This is an ancient past, especially the period before the Middle Ages. So this is the past. The past happened in the Middle Ages. So next is Pope John Paul II, or known as the pro-life hero. He is a pope who spoke with a steadfast faith and inextinguishable commitment to human dignity for all. Next is Walnut Street Jail. This is a pioneer effort in prison reform, originally built as a conventional jail just before the American Revolution. It was expanded in 1790 and hailed as a model of enlightened thinking about criminals. So this is one of the jail before the Walnut Street Jail. So I put the photo of it. Next is King Henry VIII. He is also a king of England from April 2022, April 22, 1509 until his death in 1547. So next is King Edward VI. He is a king of England and Ireland from January 28, 1547 until his death in 1553. He is known for the Boy King. So the major issues facing prisons and jail in the Philippines, first is the prison population, overcrowding, improvement of prison conditions, increase of drug-related offenders, and lastly, the shortage of effective treatment and programs. So that's the major issues facing the prisons and jail here in the Philippines. So in year 2018, I saw that Philippines held the sixth highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. So that's a lot, and we are not proud to say that we are the sixth highest prison population of 21 Asian countries. So in the year 2019, Philippine population rested at 108.31 million people. 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. So, incarcerated means the act of imprisoning someone or the state of being imprisoned despite the drop in crime in past decades and rates of arrest. So, Philippine incarceration rate is about 200 per 100,000 citizens. So, that's a lot. So, 933 prisons running in the Philippines, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. So I have some photos um, put in my slides or in my PowerPoint. I hope you will see it. So 5 facts about Philippines incarceration system. This is the severe overcrowding. pretrial detainees hide that tools, vigilant, vigilant justice, and last is the corruption. So first is severe overcrowding. This is a condition where people are located within a given space that is considered tolerable from a safety and health perspective. Here in the Philippines has the highest jail occupancy rate in the world, exacerbated by the Duterte government's war on drugs, in which hundreds of thousands of people have been jailed since July 2016. So those people who has jailed in July 2016 are known as they are using drugs. So that's one of the reason why our jail here or our correction here in the Philippines facing the problem that overcrowding. So this is one of the there's a lot of pictures I put because it's look like a sardines and it's not good for individuals to have that kind of situation there in inside the correction, and they don't have any privacy for that, and it's really hot, I think. So in Manila City Jail, popularly known as the old Bilibid prison, is a detention center in Manila, Philippines. The jail is one of the most overcrowded in the world. Began overcrowding at the start of Rodrigo Duterte administration during the crackdown on the drug-related crimes. So, Old Bilibid Prison was the, um, I think, the biggest um, jail here in the Philippines, but it was reported that um, the most overcrowded in the world, and um, it's not that good to say. So this jail was divided into two sectors, or this correction, I'm sorry, this correction divided into two sectors. First is the Carville or the jail, Presidio or the prison. So the Carville accommodated 600 inmates and the Presidio hold 527 prisoners. So that's the only um, prisoners they accommodated, but because of the drug on war of the third day, it made that prison overcrowded. So in Quezon City Jail was built in 1953 originally to house 800 people. Critics says this overcrowding is a predictable effect of President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs, a crackdown the pugnacious new leader promised in the campaign that propelled him into office. So, war on drug was the reason for this um, kind of situation inside the corrections. So, Beltran, a 29-year-old temp worker, the food he is a temp worker in Quezon City jail. So this is one of his experiences inside the the correction. So he said that the food is terrible and it's hard to find a space to sleep, especially when it rains. He also added that life inside is harder for the new guys. So as we analyze what he said, it's very hard, and I think um, I cannot help myself to be in that kind of position or in that kind of scenario. So his fellow inmate is Romeo Payhoy or Payhoy, a 38 years old, another newcomer, and while he says he was scared coming inside the prison, it hasn't been as bad as he anticipated. Just cramped and lacking any privacy. Yes, lacking any privacy because of the overcrowding inside the institution. He also added that he feels safer inside the prison or the jail than out of the street where the cops could kill you. So he also added that kind of um, quote that he feels safer inside the jail than out of the street, because I think that's the um, situation right now about the drug on war. So the severe overcrowding as well as related problems such as lack of privacy, yes, cause or exacerbated mental health problems, especially we are now facing the pandemic, a COVID-19 virus, and increased rates of violence, self-harm, and suicide. So, overcrowding is one of the key contributing factors to poor prison conditions around the world. So, second is pre-trial detainees. It is someone who detained by the state while they are waiting for a trial to determine whether they are innocent or guilty of a crime. So, the difference between detainees and prisoners are pre-trial detainees and convicted prisoners. You might think that detainees would have greater rights and privilege than convicted prisoners. So next is the World Prison Brief. So we have 75.1% of incarceration within the Philippines. Incarceration system are pre-trial. So in year 2018, or we have 141,422 of 188,278 prisoners were pre-trial detainees. On average, prisoners in Philippines are detained for 9 months without being sentenced. Can you imagine that you you are not even sentenced, but you are experiencing you are experiencing that kind of situation inside the institution or inside the prison, that you will you don't have any privacy. You are um you can be a harmful there um because of the viruses that we are facing right now. So it's not safe. I can't help myself to live in that kind of place. So there are some rights of a pretrial detainee. So the Miranda rights, the voluntariness, the waiving your Miranda rights, your right to counsel a trial, and the bail. Bail have a timing of bail hearing, denial of bail, and review and appeal of bail decision. So Miranda rights, we have the right to remain silent, the right of counsel, the right to a free lawyer. So voluntariness, a confession you make to the police must be voluntary in order to use at your trial. The word voluntary may be confusing, however, because it actually means is something like not coerced. This is context. So voluntariness of a prisoner or a detainer. I'm so sorry. So third is waiving your Miranda rights. If you waive your Miranda rights, then the burden is on the prosecutor to show that you waive them voluntarily, knowingly, and intelligently. So if you are waiving your Miranda rights, you should know, or the prosecutor read your Miranda rights. You are voluntarily waiving your Miranda rights. Fourth is your right to counsel or a trial. It is protected by the Constitution. So we have two amendments. So the overview of six amendments and the deliberately elicited test. The last is bail. To be released, you may be required to pay money or post bond in an amount set by the judge. Next is um, the high death tolls. 5 facts about Philippines incarceration system. So it is the number of deaths resulting from a particular cause, especially an accident, battle, or natural disaster inside the institutional correction. So the high death tolls. So in year 2019, Chief Ernesto Tamayo, Chief of the National Bilibid Prison or NBP in Muntinlupa Prison Hospital Chief said that about 5,200 die in Bilibid each year, mostly infectious diseases. So around 20% of all inmates die each year. So it is because of the diseases, and it is also the um, the reason of a overcrowded. So I saw that in the internet, and I think that's the correct photo for what I said. So Godfrey Gamboa, former inmate in New Bilibid prison, claimed that many prisoners there died due to being given food that has gone bad. He said a lot of them died because most of the food is already spoiled. They get weak. So, um, according to Godfrey Gamboa, that um, prisoners died due to being given food that had gone bad. So that's too bad. But I think I will believe that if I personally see it. We don't know, or I don't know what's the truth inside that institutions. Next is vigilant justice, the actions of a single person or group of people who claim to enforce the law but lack of legal authority to do so. That's vigilant justice. So President Rodrigo Duterte, Philippine president, has a perverse idea for a job creation program. Hire the unemployed to kill criminal suspects. If he said that if you lose your job, I'll give you one. Kill all the drug addicts. So that's President Rodrigo Duterte. So the third is drug on war. The Philippine drug war is the anti-drug policy and actions of the Philippine government under President Duterte, who assumed office on June 30, 2016. So just a lot of people protest about that um, killing killing here in the Philippines. So Human Rights Watch research has turned the official narrative on its head. They found that many of 3,271 killings the police attributed to vigilantes and drug gangs are a veneer to shield themselves and police agents from culpability in that squad style extrajudicial execution. So those who killed the suspected drug addicts are they are called vigilants or the drug gangs. So many of victims appear to have been innocent by any definition, and none had been proved guilty in a court of law. So it's sad, sad to hear that news, but we don't have anything to do right now. So just I don't try drugs so that we will not experience that kind of situation, so that we are freely can go out in our home, individual home. So extrajudicial killing, this is a killing of person by governmental authorities without the sanction of any judicial proceeding or legal process. So when someone is an official position deliberately kills a person without any legal process, that is extrajudicial um, killing. So one example is the war on drug or drug war. So this is the examples I got in the internet. that they were killed because they are suspected as drug addicts. So last is the corruption. In the most basic version, correction officers accept bribes or sexual favors to smuggle weapons, drugs, or cell phones to inmates or to provide inmates with other benefits. So, bribe is to persuade someone to act in one's favor, typically or dishonestly, by a gift of money or other inducement. So, that's one of the things that happening inside the corruption. So prison corruption, especially on the grand scale revealed in the Philippine case, can undermine the deterrent effects of criminal punishment, as perpetrators know that the most unappealing aspects of prison are isolation, lack of privacy, yes, that's one, separation from loved ones, need not exist for those who can afford to pay bribe. So it's not fair for those people um who are experiencing those overcrowded places, and those people who can afford to pay bribes, especially those who are rich prisoners, and it's very unfair. So the corruption in prison can encourage crimes involving activities such as drug drug dealing, human trafficking, and other types of corruption inside the correction. So in Metro Manila or CNN Philippines, September 12th, inmates and jail guards have forged an unholy alliance to break the rules inside the New Bilibid prison for money. A Bureau of Correction official admitted the ex-Bucor official reveals money-making schemes in Bilibid. So that was stated by Antonio Santos. So this is what he said. They tried to rotate Bucor personnel to dislodge ties they have been forged with prisoners. So he he is the one who stated that. So this some pictures I got on the internet. So history of prison. From the birth of modern civilization in 3rd millennia BC, almost every major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as a mean to detain and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people. So the earliest records for prisons come from the 1st millennia BC, located in the area of mighty Asian civilization of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Prisons were almost always stationed in underground dungeons. Prisoners command to become slaves if they are not sentenced to death. Prisoners were held in the poorly isolated buildings, high, high walls or bars, but simple wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. Ancient Roman Empire continued to use harsher methods before. So Mesopotamia, this is a prisons in early Mesopotamia. The prisons in early Mesopotamia were used as holding places until a case or judgment was decided on the basis of confessions, witnesses, or through ritualistic procedure. In the hymn to Nungal, the river ordeal was used to determine guilt. In Egypt, while criminals in ancient Egypt certainly existed, there is little evidence of actual prisons. Instead, there are accounts of immediate punishment such as flogging, mutilation, and death, and all sentences were decided by the vizier. So, during 19th century, prisoners started perceive, perceiving more care. Concept of rehabilitation was introduced and governments around the world started recon- reconsidering their views in solitary confinement. So the Magna Carta, this is a great charter, is a document guaranteeing English political liberties that was drafted at Runnymede, a meadow by the River Thames and signed by King John on June 15, 1215, under pressure from his rebellious barons. So, as of 2006, it is estimated that over 9 million people are imprisoned worldwide, with the United States leading in the rate of incarceration. They have 743 per 100,000 people. So that's a lot. So this is a photo. So the modern prison system was created in Benjamin Franklin's living room. The the roots of American sprawling prison system, which houses more than 2.2 million inmates, go back to the idea hatched in Ben Franklin's living room. So Philadelphia's fiance in 1787, um, many of who belonged in Philadelphia society or for alleviating the miseries of public prisons, gathered in Benjamin Franklin's living room. So in Eastern State Penitentiary, opened in 1829, differed from other criminal punishment at the time. This is designed by the famed architect John Haviland, featured 7 wings of 250 individual cells. So Walnut Street Jail, I discussed that earlier. So next is in 16th and 17th century prisons. Early European prisons were used to hold people before their trials or while they awaited their punishment. So the facilities weren't maintained and the prisons weren't cared for. Many died for the reason that they are a lot of people died from diseases. So the end of 17th century began to operate as houses of correction. Next is Bridewell, a royal palace donated to London to be used as an orphanage and house of correction for wayward women, and expanded to include the disorderly poor and many other offenses. So first to use an inmate classification and treatment system, train and educate all inmates, employ a full-time and paid prison staff, and use cell and solitary confinement. So this is a photo that I take on the internet or I got in the internet, the Bridewell. So in the 18th century prisons, offenders were deported to the new British colonies in America or to the other countries. However, this practice ended with the close of Revolutionary War and the formation of the United States. So there are two popular remaining punishment: houses of correction and the hard labor. Hard labor is has a sentence of time to work house where inmates perform manual labor all day, every day. So, English philosopher and Jeremy Bentham advocated for prison improvements. So, Jeremy Bentham supported strict treatment for prisoners but safe and sanitary conditions. The Quakers advocate humane treatment for prisoners and a move away from corporal or capital punishment. Age of Enlightenment, sometimes called Age of Reason, when people began to value reason and rationality, played the largest role in a prison reform. So, late 18th century, prisons were generally based on Bentham's philosophy. Prisons resembled workhouses but strive to offer humane living conditions with an eye toward reforming offenders. So in 19th century prisons, all cells are visible from a central guard station. Pennsylvania, and the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia adopted the solitary system. So, solitary system, sometimes called as the separate system, that meant that inmates were kept in separate cells or for eating, sleeping, and working. So, one cell is equivalent to one prison or a detainee. So, next is in late 1800s, the purpose of prison time shifted slightly to include deterrence. The goal was still to rehabilitate offenders and return them to society, but also to prevent criminal acts and reoffending. So, in 20th century prisons, the prison reform moved began in the late 1800s as lasted through about 1930. This was a movement to end the torture and inhumane treatment of prisoners. So in 20th century prisons, um, that was the end of the torture and inhumane treatment inside the correction. So next is history of correction punishment prevention of rehabilitation. Inmate at Newgate Prison, London, 1724. A terrible, stinking, dark, and dismal place, situated underground into which no daylight can come. It was paved with stone. The prisoners had no beds and lay on the pavement, and whereby they endured great misery and hardship. That was before the ancient times. So the punishment could be brutal. The condemned boiled in oil or fed to wild beasts. So for me, I don't really want to experience that kind of um, punishment. That's why I really don't want to commit crime because that's very harsh punishment before, and I can't help myself to survive that kind of situation. So the Code of Hammurabi in Babylon, the is generally considered the first such set of laws. The laws of Moses, as recorded in the Bible, also cited offenses against the community and their corresponding punishments. Next is medieval times had very harsh punishment also. The depths of the Dark Ages can cruel instruments that tortured as they killed. For example, is the rock stretched its victim until their bodies were torn apart. So it's very um it's very hard to think that your body will be torn apart because you committed crime or you have a depths on the dark ages. So it's very hard. Confinement. Those arrested were usually confined or imprisoned until they confessed to crime and their physical punishment occur. So next is the rise of nations. Those found guilty of serious crimes could be transported instead of executed. In England, Georgia in United States, and Australia in France to South America. So many prisoners did not survive the harsh conditions either on board the transport ships or life in the early colonies to which they were sent. So the colonial and early post-revolutionary periods, Americans used stocks, pillories, branding, flogging, and maiming, such as cutting an ear or slitting nostrils to punish offenders. The death penalty was used frequently, so it is very harsh punishment before. Early New York State, 20% of the offenses that warranting the death penalty, including pickpocketing, horse stealing, and robbery. Puritans of Massachusetts believed that humans had no control over their fate. Many early Americans felt there was no need for rehabilitation. Pennsylvania, made by the Quakers, led by William Penn. So, early criminal code, they abolished execution for all crimes except homicide, replaced physical punishment with imprisonment and hard labor, did not charge the prisoners for their food and housing. So next is the ideas of enlightenment emphasize the importance of individual. So England, John Howard in 1726 to 990 wrote The State of Prisons in England and Wales in 1777. This described the horrible treatment of prisoners. He advocated segregating prisoners by age, sex, type of crime, paying the staff, hiring medical officials and chaplains, supplying prisoners with adequate food and clothing. So in Penitentiary Act of 1779, it called the first secure and sanitary penitentiary. This law eliminated the charging of fees. So in 1779, the Penitentiary Act authorized the construction of two prisons in accordance with his own theories. He advocated a regime of solitary confinement, hard labor, and religious instruction. The objective of imprisonment, he believed, was reform and rehabilitation, not just punishment. Rehabilitation, not just punishment. Next is the reform movement. Reformers work to abolish slavery, secure women rights, and prohibit liquor, as well as to charge the correction system. So, Pennsylvania system in 1787 established the Philadelphia Society for Elevating the Miseries of Public Prisons, led by Dr. Benjamin Rush. So this system is for the imprisonment of criminals rather than physical and capital punishment. So in the Auburn system, New York, 1819, they used the Quaker idea of solitary confinement at night, but used a system of congregating inmates in a common workroom during the day. So in European countries, they used the Pennsylvania system, and the American used the Auburn system. Next is Cincinnati's Declaration. Because many prison administration were corrupt, convicts were mistreated and used as a cheap labor. They believed that the prison system should be more committed to reform. So the values in Declaration of Pioneer included the following. So Pioneer include the following. Penal system should be based on the reformation, not suffering. Yes. Good conduct should be rewarded. Indeterminate sentencing should include the ability for prisoners to earn their freedom early through hard work and good behavior. Citizens should understand the society is responsible for the conditions that led to crime. Prisoners should recognize that they can change their lives. So, Elmira Reformatory in New York, Zebulon Brockway in 27 rather to 1920. Brockway believed that rehabilitation could be achieved through education. Inmates who did well in both academic and moral subjects earned early release for accumulating points behavior, and poor performance in the educational courses prolonged the individual sentence. So, prison reform in early 20th century. So, many of the reforms had merit. Most could not be properly implemented due to inadequate funding or unwillingness of prison officials to act. So, prison reform in early have first is prisons as workplace rehabilitation model, community correction, and justice model. So, rehabilitation or punishment, public goals, and recidivism. So according to 1996 survey conduct by the College of Criminal Justice or CCJ of some Houston State University in Texas, about half of the public sees the goal of prisons as rehabilitation, or 48.4%. So that is the photo of the university. So unfortunately, no approach to prison reform has had much enough effect on the recidivism rate among the released prisoners. So juveniles by the late 1700s, children ages 7 years or younger were presumed to be incapable for criminal intent, a concept that has carried over the present time. So Juvenile Court Act of 1899, first juvenile court located in Cook Country using the British doctrine of parens patriae, an act to formalize the right of the state to intervene in the lives of juveniles in a way that was different from the manner in which a state dealt with others. So this is the juvenile court is where those children like a 7 or the like 18 below are put. To according to juvenile justice, a century of change by 1997, most states had adopted new sticker laws of dealing the juvenile offenders in one or more of the following. So transfer provisions, sentencing authority, confidentiality, victims' right, and correctional programming. So religion's role in prison. So the influence and practice of religion in the correctional setting is as old as the history of prisons. Initial entry of religion into prison was probably carried out by religious men who themselves were imprisoned. So the Bible stories of such prisoners includes Joseph and Jeremiah on the Old Testament, John the Baptist, Peter, and Paul in New Testament. Beginning in the days of Constantine, the early Christian church granted to criminals who would otherwise have been mutilated or killed. So Joseph, hated for his brothers, is sold into Egypt and faces crushing test. His master's wife falsely accuses him of attempted rape and he goes to prison. That's the reason why he was imprisoned. A man who makes the most of his opportunities in prison will probably make the most of the opportunities granted him elsewhere. Next is Jeremiah, a political prisoner. He has the story of the prophet who abandons his family and the woman he loves in order to relay God's message in Jerusalem. So he abandoned his family and even his wife just because to relay God's message in Jerusalem. So next is John the Baptist. Jesus compared Herod Antipas to a fox. John the Baptist fell into the fox's jaws for speaking against his degenerate behavior. John was not that idle in prison but continued to speak with his disciples and to explain truth to the king who had imprisoned him. So, just John, imprisoned below ground, John seems to have become despondent. His faith may even have faltered for John the Baptist, who had wandered the wilderness and proclaimed the gospel of 2000. The gospel to 1,000 prison must have been a heavy burden. So next is Peter. Through his arrest and rescue, Peter was a miraculous testimony to the power of God, for he had no active part except by prayer in bringing about his own jailbreak. So next is Paul was imprisoned several times and wrote much from prison. A list of letters and volumes produced in prison or a result of prison experiences would run to considerable length. So his letter to Ephesus, Philippe, Colossae, Philemon, and the second to Timothy were penned from prison either while he was in the Caesarea or else in Rome, to which he was ultimately transferred. He frequently mentions his incarceration to them. So Constantine was the first emperor to convert to Christianity. He began to favor Christianity beginning in 312, being baptized by either Eusebius of Nicomedia, an Arian bishop, or Pope Sylvester, which is maintained by the Catholic Church and Coptic Orthodox. So that's all of my report. I hope you learned something, and thank you.